After my husband lost his memory in a car accident, I dragged his mistress to his hospital bed. She's your wife. He stared suspiciously at the wedding ring on my finger. I immediately pulled it off and slipped it onto the woman's hand. I'm a pretentious coquette. The ring was stolen by me. He didn't believe it. I sighed, all right. Truth revealed. I'm the homewrecker. Chapter 1. The hospital room was terrifyingly quiet. Jennifer, do you think I'm mentally ill, or just lacking in intelligence? I lowered my head and muttered softly. I think both. He held my hand gently, his eyes softer than ever before. Jenna, stop joking. I've lost my memory, not my mind. I froze on the spot. He hadn't called me by my nickname for over a year. Francis. How old are you now? 21. I couldn't help but burst out laughing. He and Valentina looked at me with a strange expression. Heaven really was playing a huge joke on me. The husband who had cheated on me for a year suddenly returned to the time when he loved me the most. Francis and I fell in love during college. After graduation, we married under the witness of our families. Both families were well matched. A powerful alliance. After 7 years of marriage, perhaps he had grown tired of my fine delicacies and developed a taste for simple home cooking outside. He hid it well, call logs, texts, WeChat, all squeaky clean, but in truth, I had known for a long time. From the inexplicable laughter during his so-called meetings, the cute desserts he brought home after work, the increasing number of sky photos in his gallery, the frequent pet videos on TikTok, and the day he gave me a necklace identical to one I already owned. I smiled and asked why he bought another. He said my old one looked worn out, and he wanted to reward me with a new one. I lied to him because there was no old one. In the 9th month of their affair, Valentina came to me directly. She invited me to the dessert shop where they had made their relationship official. She showed me their travel photos, every meal they shared, the little dog they raised together. When it was about to slide into X-rated territory, I pressed her hand down and flipped the phone face down on the table. Miss Valentina, what do you expect me to do? She gripped my hand, eyes full of pleading. She said she and Francis were truly in love, and she hoped I could let them be together. She even said Francis no longer loved me, perhaps afraid I wouldn't believe her. She played a recording. Francis's voice was hoarse and low. It was clearly pillow talk. I didn't continue listening. My upbringing told me to remain rational at all times. Miss Valentina, Mr. Koo and I are not an ordinary couple. If he chooses to bring up divorce himself, I will accept it. I picked up my milk tea and took a light sip. I appeared calm, but in reality, my palms were sweating. My family and the Koo family were too deeply entangled. We shared prosperity, and we shared ruin. That's why he only dared to fool around behind my back, and why I never exposed Francis Koo's cheating. We were the model couple of the elite circle. He handled business negotiations, and I handled socializing with the wealthy wives. A family scandal could only be swallowed in silence. Chapter 2. But now, my problem was making such a scene that if I didn't fix it soon, I wouldn't be able to get to work on time. The atmosphere in the ward grew stranger and stranger. Valentina crouched by the bedside, piecing together the fragments of her phone and crying. She had just shown Francis their couple photos and the wedding shots. Francis, as if mad, smashed her phone to pieces. He still didn't believe it. I leaned against the window to get some air. When I turned to look at him, his eyes were rimmed in red as he kept staring at me. Francis, Valentina didn't lie. She really is the woman you love most. That's impossible. Jenna, we just got married. Yesterday we pledged our vows in the church, and just now you were in my arms imagining our baby. I felt the absurdity of it all. Francis, look closely. I'm 29 now, not 21. You lost your memory. You didn't time travel. When you recover, you'll understand. Aside from the divorce, let's cut contact from now on. I picked up my bag and started to leave. Valentina ran after me. She fell to her knees in front of me, sobbing. She said Francis had staged the accident to come back and ask me for a divorce. She begged me not to block her contact with him, not to interfere with his memory recovery. I agreed to her, because I was even more desperate than she was. Chapter 3. But not even a day after I returned, a phone call interrupted someone's good time. I coaxed and coaxed before he finally handed the phone back to me. No sooner had I answered than Francis's crying voice came through the receiver. He said he didn't love Valentina at all, that he hated sweets and didn't like dogs. I told Francis to open his own photo album, maybe it would bring back some memory, but he insisted his album was completely clean. By the end, he suspected I had hired an actress to test him. I lost my patience. The person behind me had lost patience too. That person guided my hand toward a scorching place and leaned close to my ear, breathing softly. As my thoughts blurred, that person snatched the phone from my hand, powered it off, and tossed it onto the carpet. Chapter 4. The next day, I was late again. As soon as I pushed open the office door, I saw Francis, unshaven and disheveled, sitting at my desk. He asked me why I hadn't gone home yesterday, and said he had asked many people. They all told him that our marriage was wonderful, that we were the kind of enviable couple everyone admired, the perfect pair. Even his parents had called, asking us to come home for the reunion festival. I rubbed my forehead with a sigh. Francis, all of that was an act. How could you even fool yourself? But he still didn't believe it. His gaze suddenly fell on my neck, and his pupils shrank sharply. Jennifer, you cheated on me, didn't you? That's why you're trying to trick me, to pin the blame on me. I instinctively touched my neck. Didn't you say just the other day we were still married? Maybe these marks were left the day before? Francis suddenly stood up, the desk shaking from the force. His eyes were red. The doctor said I was in a coma for a whole week. The marks all over your neck. Do you think I'm stupid? I set down my bag and casually sat on the sofa. I had an allergic reaction. So what? You and Valentina's photos are the real insult to anyone's intelligence. No sooner had I finished than Valentina burst in, disheveled and clutching a stack of documents. Francis, our photos aren't fake. This is the authentication report. Look. Before she could finish, Francis snatched the report from her hands and tore it to shreds. He pointed at her nose and scolded her mercilessly. The woman he had once loved most was now being degraded with the vilest of words, reduced to dust before his eyes. Valentina broke down, screaming in the office. To minimize the impact, I had security escort her out and told outsiders she was mentally unstable. I even approved her a long leave of absence. Francis stubbornly held my hand, as though remembering something, insisting on taking me somewhere. Chapter 5. The car stopped in front of a temple, crowded with worshippers coming and going. Francis pulled me to the matchmaking tree, and relying on memory, he found that rotting wooden plaque. He looked thrilled, as if this meant everything, but I wasn't the one with memory loss. Why show me this? They say online that Buddha guides true love and cuts off doomed fates. Honestly, it seemed to make sense. Francis, maybe you should look further up. Who knows? There might be a surprise waiting, maybe a plaque at the top. His smile froze for a second. I lifted a careless smile of my own. I told him there was no need to look up. Maybe if he just checked around, he'd find the plaque he hung with Valentina just last month. To make Valentina happy, he had spent a fortune, nearly covering the whole tree with plaques. A gust of wind blew by, lifting the stray strands of hair on my forehead, and also flipped over a brand new plaque. On it were the words, Francis, Valentina, together for all lifetimes, never part until old age. See? All lifetimes didn't turn out to be that long after all. Francis's face grew darker and darker. In a frenzy, he began tearing down every plaque on the tree, but he still refused to believe. I wondered why he couldn't accept that our marriage had reached its end. He said he loved me deeply, that it was impossible he had ever cheated. He even claimed he must have been possessed, like in one of those time travel novels. I shook my head. No, it wasn't something that happened all at once. When Valentina first appeared, Francis was harsh with her. She kept messing up the data, and he was strict, keeping work and personal life separate. He even wanted to fire her at one point. I felt sorry for her because her family was poor and she just graduated with little experience. So I decided to give her a chance and moved her to another position. She didn't let me down. Through her own effort, she climbed the ladder. Once, at a business reception, a client made things difficult for Valentina. Francis stepped in to help and offended the client. When he came home and told me about it, he beamed, waiting for my praise like a peacock showing off its tail. I thought it was the behavior of a good boss, so I just praised him casually. After that, they frequently traveled on business together. At every stop, Francis would take photos for me, report back, and share anything interesting right away. Once on the phone, I overheard Valentina beside him calling him a wife-adoring fanatic, saying she wanted a boyfriend like that too. Francis's expression changed instantly. He warned her to mind her manners. That was one of the things I admired about Francis at first. He knew boundaries and had a sense of propriety. He was top of his class, beloved by his advisor, and while some underclassmen quietly showed their admiration, he was straightforward and direct. He always had my name on his lips, saying it in speeches, in his public remarks. When I asked why, he said he wanted to proclaim his love for me to the world. At the height of it, he even had my name engraved on his wrist. When did he stop sharing things with me? I think it started the day Valentina hid a nearly frozen puppy in her bag and put it into the car. The puppy let out a soft bark. Valentina imitated the bark. Francis didn't scold her. He was amused by her silly imitation and laughed. So when he came back and told me the story, he was unusually happy. Or maybe it was when their car broke down midway and Francis was irritated. She squatted nearby telling jokes and reassuring him that it was nothing to worry about. When I came to pick them up, they were huddled under a roof overhang. Francis's coat was draped over Valentina. He only had a soaked white shirt on. Because of that, we had an argument. He thought I was making a fuss. The car breakdown wasn't his fault. Valentina's shirt was wet, and he had simply shielded the girl. But what bothered me wasn't the coat. It was their shoulders leaning together, the way their hems met in the wind. Under that eave, the woman was wildly imaginative in her talk, and the man looked down at her, occasionally smiling indulgently. That smile I knew too well. It couldn't fool me. I watched and analyzed them in a self-torturing loop, until I saw Valentina lead a dejected Francis into a dessert shop. I sat behind them and ordered the same dessert. After one bite I set mine down. So did Francis. When I breathed a sigh of relief, Francis returned carrying a box of small cakes. He hummed a tune. His steps were lighter than I'd ever seen. I thought, my husband must be falling in love. I stopped fighting him and began to inventory every asset in my name, waiting for him to bring up divorce, because I couldn't accept that the man I loved for 10 years had become a coward who did wrong but wouldn't take responsibility. When we were together, I once told him, if one day he wanted to part ways or fell for someone else, just tell me, we'll end it cleanly. But I waited a year. They flirted for a year. Still no confession from him. Suddenly, I felt like a total failure. Chapter 6. The roar of the crowd snapped me back to reality. A circle of people had formed around the matchmaking tree. They recorded Francis's meltdown on their phones, and me standing there, even with all the evidence laid out before him. He still wouldn't believe it. I reached out to steady him. At that moment his phone rang, a special ringtone he'd set just for his little lover. He didn't answer. He didn't even look closely. He swiped twice and deleted and blocked her. He stood up and smiled at me, pleading that I come home with him for the reunion festival. There was nothing joyful about it, really. But to make him give up, I still went. At the dinner table there was an uninvited guest, Francis's good friend Sean. Sean came over grinning, still as prone to teasing me as ever. You have terrible taste. Francis waved his hand to tell him not to be rude to me. No sooner had we sat than Mr. Koo shot me a frosty look. You've been married 7 years and don't even have one child. Have you been checked? Mrs. Koo glanced awkwardly at him and signaled him to hold back. Francis snapped back immediately. If you want kids, go be a nanny. Male nannies are in demand too. In the past he would have just taken a photo and then bowed his head to his phone, chatting with someone I didn't know. Actually, when we first married he used to defend me. Later he even flipped the table once. Only after his father bowed his head did we resume the celebration. After that they didn't pressure us for a long time. A year ago it started again, and once they tested Francis's reaction they only stepped it up. It wasn't strange that I couldn't conceive. When Francis and I had just married, my parents died unexpectedly. There was a mountain of company business for me to handle, and I was overwhelmed. I finally got through it and grew the company, while Francis was frequently away on business. After I found out he cheated, the possibility of a child vanished entirely. Chapter 7. The tense atmosphere at the table made it hard to breathe. Sean broke the ice with a smile. Uncle Koo, pregnancy depends on timing, location, And harmony, maybe someone's just not up to it. He raised his glass and looked at me with a lazy glance. That's enough. I don't want children at all. With a loud scrape, Francis shot to his feet and pulled my arm, dragging me out. He cried as we left, calling himself an asshole for failing to protect me. Inside the house there was the sound of porcelain shattering. My phone kept ringing. I didn't pick up. Eventually he sent a text. If you don't come home now, don't come back. Harsh, but I knew he had been crying. Are you going to forgive him? Are you going to leave me? I was about to reply when Francis snatched my phone and, without looking, blacked out the screen. I looked up at him and smiled. Why stop pretending now? He dropped to his knees, begging for my forgiveness. Jennifer, we loved for 4 years and have been married for 8. We're like family already. Let's get back on track and spend the rest of our lives together. Okay? I thought, how can someone shamelessly beg like that? He gripped my hand and painted a vivid picture of how deeply we once loved one another. As he spoke, he began to cry. He started to long for the college-era me, passionate, bright, and brave. He took me to the wishing pond on the back hill. He stood before me, tears on his face, yet happy like a child. Jennifer, do you remember? It was right here I proposed to you. You walked up in your gown and I thought, I finally married the one I love most. Sadly, no one had been here in over a year. The pond was covered in algae and the area overgrown with weeds. Noticing where my eyes wandered, he gently promised he would clean the place up like before and plant my favorite gardenias. I pulled my hand away, looked into his shattered eyes, and told him, word by word, that we could never go back. He had someone he loved, and so did I. He shook his head. No. It's not like that. I don't love her. I just thought she reminded me of the you from college, the same bright, hopeful spirit, full of life. He always had excuses, but I had never changed. When my parents died in a car crash before my eyes, I couldn't stop trembling every time I got into a car. I never told him. In front of him, I stayed optimistic and strong. I clawed my way out of PTSD on my own, straightened out all the mess of the Sue family business. Yet he told me I had changed, that he missed who I used to be. What a joke. Francis, I'm not dead. I don't need you finding a replacement for me. No, you could never be replaced in my heart. I didn't mean it. It only happened once. I was drunk, and I mistook her for you. A sound came from the distance. Valentina stood at the corner, tears streaming down her face. A wishing bottle lay broken on the ground, its paper stars scattered everywhere. We had one like that in our bedroom too, a gift Francis gave me in sophomore year. Each star filled with his words of love. By now, it must be rotting away in the trash. Francis only glanced back once, then turned to me again, clutching my hand and swearing he would cut off all ties with Valentina. He'd fire her, and if I was still angry, he'd send her abroad, never to return. Enough. Francis, I've already endured it. I've already let go. Why are you dragging me back? I yanked my hand free and walked away. He ran after me. As he passed Valentina, she choked out, Francis, I'm pregnant. Abort it. I turned back to look. His face was the same as ever, not a flicker of emotion. And to think I had loved this man. How was it any different from loving someone with a criminal record? You unfilial son. How dare you? Mr. Koo stormed over and slapped me across the face without a word. I froze, stunned, my ears buzzing. The next second Sean punched him to the ground. Mrs. Koo gave me a worried glance, then rushed to separate the two men grappling on the floor. Francis came running, only for Sean to hit him too. I finally pulled him off. Francis sat dazed on the ground. Sean, what are you doing? Just sick of seeing you bully a woman. I used to call Uncle Sue uncle, so I have the duty to stand up for his daughter. Sean's father and mine had been close brothers. If I hadn't met Francis in college, the Sue and Sean families would have formed a marriage alliance. After high school, Sean went abroad. Because of the time difference, I almost never managed to answer his calls, and even when I did, I rarely had much to say. One day, I mentioned meeting a boy in my club and asked Sean what gifts a guy might like. He went silent for a long time, then hung up. After that, he never contacted me again. He only posted one sentence on social media: what should I do if my home was stolen? Out of concern as a friend, I sent him a message asking if a thief had broken into his home. He said yes. After a long pause, he asked how things were going with that boy. I told him I was with Francis. He said nothing more. My childhood playmate vanished from my life until he returned to take over his family's company in business. It was inevitable he crossed paths with Francis. Somehow they became close, inseparable friends. Sean's house was right next to the Koo residence. Every year at the reunion festival the Kus would invite him over. Since he was always alone, he usually refused. I didn't know why he came this time. Chapter 8. The next day. I didn't know what had happened, but Mrs. Koo herself called me, inviting me to dinner, saying she wanted to apologize. When I arrived, Sean was there too. Francis and Valentina sat together, with 2 empty seats left. I chose to sit next to Sean. It was hard not to suspect he arranged things that way. Mrs. Koo stood up first, speaking warmly of how much she had once liked me. Then she cast a look at Mr. Koo, who reluctantly stood and downed a glass of wine. I didn't need their apology. Calmly, I turned to Francis and, in front of everyone, said I wanted a divorce. He refused almost instantly, then shot an angry glare at his parents. Mrs. Koo tried to soothe things with a smile. Jennifer, dear, I know you've suffered, but the Koo family needs an heir. Since your womb has been so quiet, why not let Valentina give birth and raise the child by your side? Sean suddenly laughed, his glass striking the table with a sharp clang. I asked you here to apologize, not to make wishes. I placed the divorce agreement and a pen on the table, gently sliding them to Francis. Mrs. Koo, whether Valentina has her child or not has nothing to do with me. I'm here to discuss divorce. Mr. Koo sneered. 8 years married and you couldn't conceive. What are you being so proud of? If it weren't for Francis liking you, this marriage would have ended long ago. You never bore a child. Don't expect a penny of my son's fortune. I smiled faintly. Whether I get anything isn't up to you, it's up to the law. Francis trembled with rage, tearing the divorce papers to shreds. Jennifer Sue, I will not agree to a divorce. I'll take care of Valentina. Just wait for me. I pushed back my chair and stood. Then I'll see you in court. Mrs. Koo immediately objected. No, that would be disgraceful. People will laugh at us. I opened the door without looking back. Then I'll leave it to you. Mrs. Koo, in the elite circle, who doesn't have a mistress or 2? Everyone just keeps one eye closed. Even the Wong family's son-in-law kept a mistress. Madame Wong, unable to conceive, raised the other woman's child as her own, until I told her maybe she should check what was in that bird's nest soup she drank every night. She froze, but in the end she never checked. After all, her husband controlled everything in the Wong business. But I couldn't do that. I wasn't a woman clinging to Francis. I had my own home, my own company. I just couldn't understand, why does love, in the end, always turn out the same? Chapter 9. A month later, Francis called to tell me Valentina had miscarried. I thought he had changed into something terrifying. Even a tiger won't eat its own cubs. Yet he had dared to harm his own child, and he blamed it all on his love for me, claiming it was proof he had come to his senses. A prodigal son returning home. But in the 15-second recording Valentina had given me, his breath was ragged, his voice hoarse as he said, Valentina, of course I love you. I blocked him. This wasn't redemption. This was skirting the edge of a crime. After work, Valentina waited outside Sucorp, crouching by the door. Her face was pale, her lips bloodless. She begged me to save her. I pried open her fingers one by one. Valentina, you should be asking the police for help. But she still couldn't bear to. Her phone's lock screen was still a photo of her kissing Francis. She collapsed on the ground, repeating over and over that Francis had just been angry that she'd come to me without permission. She knelt, apologizing through tears, begging for my forgiveness. In the end, she soothed herself, then called Francis, pleading for his forgiveness, promising she'd remain the woman in the shadows, never disturbing me again, so long as Francis loved her. But all her calls returned nothing but busy signals. That was the first time I truly saw Francis for who he was: selfish, hypocritical, ruthless. He sought out in Valentina the shadow of who I had once been, taking her to relive the things he and I had done, giving her gifts, celebrating her birthday, He enjoyed being admired. It made him feel accomplished. Just as when I used to praise him in college, it was something I, as a female CEO, could no longer give him. During the first 9 months of his cheating, I spent every day wondering whether I hadn't done enough, whether I'd failed to give him enough attention, failed to give him the emotional feedback he craved. In the first month of his affair, I even tried to change myself. I would rush to bring him lunch after meetings. When he came home drunk, I stayed by his side all night, soothing him. When he botched a project, I comforted him, told him it was nothing, then quietly cleaned up the mess behind his back. But somehow, he didn't seem to want to share things with me anymore. The lunches I delivered went uneaten. Valentina ate them instead. His chat logs were scrubbed clean. His phone always placed face down. If the screen lit up, he'd snatch it immediately. Once, half asleep, I woke to hear him whispering goodnight with his back to me. I turned and, in the hazy moonlight, asked if there was something he wanted to tell me. He instantly put down his phone, turned, wrapped his arms around my waist, and buried his head against my chest. Wife, I love you so much tonight too. I said nothing, just turned away from him. It's late, let's sleep. From then on, I stopped trying to please him. I returned to myself. I organized all my assets, ready for divorce at any moment. Chapter 10. After Valentina left, I drove back to my apartment. Night had fallen. The room was filled with a faint fragrance. Silence all around. Just as I was drifting into sleep, the doorbell rang. The man beside me lightly kissed my lips and said he would get the door. He stood up, slipped on our couple slippers, wearing nothing but a snow-white bath towel around his waist. The marks on his neck and chest weren't even hidden. He opened the door, and a voice came in. Jennifer, you bought a place here. Francis froze. Sean? What are you doing here? Sean stood with his arms crossed, my pearl hairpin still clipped in his hair. When I came out in pajamas, Francis's gaze shifted from Sean's neck to me. That's when he noticed the clothes scattered all over the living room floor, none of them intact. The lingering traces on the sofa made his eyes turn red. In an instant, his fist flew toward Sean. Sean didn't dodge. He took the punch head-on. Francis's voice was squeezed out from his throat. Sean, you're my best brother. Not anymore. Sean wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, grabbed Francis by the collar, and started to fight back. I didn't stop them. One-on-one. Sean wouldn't lose. I was just a little worried his towel might fall. Francis collapsed on the floor, staring at me in shock. Why? Sean casually wiped the blood from his hand, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. Francis, you were the one who pushed her into my arms. Have you forgotten? I should be thanking you. Actually, confusion filled Francis's eyes. He didn't remember, but I did. 4 months ago, Valentina confronted me. I kept a calm face, but when I went home, I drank myself into oblivion. I had actually been waiting for that day for 9 months. I knew Valentina would come to me sooner or later, so I told myself again and again that I had to be strong. I had to act like it didn't matter, but I still broke down. I had calculated so many things, yet not the date. That day marked the 12th anniversary of Francis and me being together. I kept drinking until 1 in the morning. At one point I tried to light a cigarette. The first drag choked me so badly I gave up. I couldn't do it. I couldn't endure it. I called Francis. On the other end came ragged breathing. His hoarse voice asked me what was wrong. What did I say back then? Right, I told him I had a fever and wanted him to come home. He said, "Honey, I'm away on a business trip. There's fever medicine at home. Take it first." I swallowed down the lump in my throat and told him I wanted him to take me to the hospital. The line went quiet for a long time, like it had ended. Then I heard the sound of sheets rustling. He told me to wait for him, so I sat on the balcony waiting and waiting. What came instead was Sean, rushing over. His hair was a mess, his suit covered in dirt. He scratched his head awkwardly and said he tripped getting out of the car. Sean and I had been classmates in high school, even desk mates. Because of the relationship between his father and mine, we often studied together after school, and naturally became good friends. But ever since he went abroad to study, I hadn't seen him privately again. After I got married, I'd only heard his name from Francis's mouth, always saying he was his best brother. At business banquets we would occasionally meet, clink glasses, and move on, never really talking. I don't know why, but that night, seeing him made me want to cry. Maybe because it reminded me of when my parents were still alive, when our two families always spent New Year's together. Sean would hand me all of his New Year's money, saying it was pocket money from an older brother to his little sister. I sat on the balcony bawling my eyes out. He smelled the alcohol in the air and quietly handed me tissues. Sitting across from me, I sobbed while talking about all the little memories of Francis and me falling in love during college. At first, Sean tried to argue back. Helping you up is just caring for you. Then what about those 5 kilometers I carried you on my back when you twisted your ankle? I looked up. That means you're strong. Buying you a bottle of milk just means being nice. Then what about all those breakfasts I made for you every single day? That means you know how to cook. In the end, Sean was so upset with me that he couldn't get a word out. While I broke into laughter through my tears, he covered his face, crying as he said I had no conscience. I comforted him, telling him I remembered all the good things he'd done for me. That time he carried me home. I copied notes for him for a month. When he made me breakfast, I shared my snacks with him. He was different from Francis. You're my best friend, you're my family. He turned his back, his voice very soft. Who wants to be just your friend? The wind was strong on the balcony, and I didn't hear him clearly. Sean helped me clean up the bottles on the ground and then left. I had sent the housekeeper away, so once again I was alone in the house. I glanced at the cold dishes on the table. Sean had wanted to pour me a drink just now, but I didn't let him. At 8 in the morning, Francis came home. I sat at the dining table, staring at the leftovers. He finally remembered it had been our anniversary yesterday. He came over apologetically and wrapped me in his arms. There was no trace of women's perfume on him, only the faint scent of body wash. A women's body wash. Francis, do you have something you want to tell me? I think he guessed what I was implying. His arms instinctively tightened around my waist. Honey, how about I take you on vacation to Sonia? I pried his hands off. No need. It's the hottest season now. He still remembered I had once said I wanted to go to Sonia, but he had forgotten I had already gone there by myself and even bought him a souvenir. I acted calm, because I had already gone mad once before. The next day, he had a pile of luxury handbags delivered home. I opened the storage cabinet door and told the saleswoman delivering them to put them inside. She beamed with a smile and said, Mrs. Koo, your husband really dotes on you. I didn't say much, only nodded, then told her my surname was Sue. When I had just married Francis, people always called me Mrs. Koo, even when I attended banquets in my own name. I only smiled and shook their hands back, saying, Hello, I'm Jennifer Sue, chairwoman of the Sue Group. Later, as the Sue Group grew stronger, people in the industry began calling me President Sue. After the saleswoman left, I locked the cabinet door, because none of those handbags were my style. This was Valentina's doing. Even careless as he was, Francis would never deliberately choose bags I disliked. He would simply have them send me the usual designs. I'm not someone who can't let go. I just needed time to adjust, to accept what everyone else thought was the most ordinary thing. Until my birthday. This time, he didn't forget. He came back. He bought cake, flowers, and a ring. He even remembered his promise to propose to me every year on my birthday. But just as he was about to slip the ring on my finger, his phone rang. The hand holding the ring was withdrawn, and my hand hung awkwardly in the air. He stood up and went to the balcony to take the call, his delicate brows furrowed in frustration. After hanging up, he told me there was a situation at the company, and he had to leave immediately. I said nothing, only nodded. A man's most common excuse for cheating. I turned to walk back inside, and just as he left through the door, he turned back again. He grabbed my shoulders and even opened his phone to show me the call log from his assistant. It really was about the company. I raised a faint smile. Got it. Go on. I have things to deal with at my company too. He left. And this time, he didn't come back. He was too careless. Yesterday, his assistant's wife had been about to give birth. Unable to reach him, she had called me instead. I approved his leave and told him to take care of his wife. I poured the cake into the trash and threw the bouquet of roses into the toilet. 2 hours later, Sean arrived, carrying a stack of photos. Jennifer, haven't you made up your mind yet? The truth was, I had already decided. I was going to make him leave with nothing. I had gathered all the evidence neatly, including the house he secretly bought for Valentina with our joint marital assets. I sat on the sofa. This time, I didn't cry. Calmly, I spoke about everything Francis and I had gone through, from college to graduation, from the start of the company to its peak, through every hardship. By the end, looking at the explicit photos on the table, a lump rose in my throat. Sean pressed his lips to mine, but I pushed him away almost instantly. This isn't fair to you. I chose this myself. I shook my head, but when he stripped off his shirt, pulled my hand to his abs, and leaned down to kiss me, I didn't refuse. That night, I contacted a lawyer to draft the divorce papers. I suppose Francis must have found out, and after also discovering that Valentina had secretly come to see me, he flew into a rage. On his way home, he got into a car accident. Chapter 11. The apartment was silent as I calmly finished recounting all the facts. Now, we were both at fault within this marriage. Francis, let's get divorced. Let's part on good terms. But he still refused. He begged me to come back to the family the way he had, saying that a prodigal son who returns is worth more than gold. Who could be as clever as him? The very first thing he thought of upon waking from the car accident was to play dumb, to pretend nothing had happened and force everything back on track. But he wasn't the only one capable of betrayal. So when he saw me point at Valentina and call her his wife, he flew into a rage and smashed her phone. Then he dragged me off to relive our once beautiful memories together. Unfortunately, those pure white memories had long since been stained with mud. Francis, I'm pregnant. The child isn't yours. The next day, the housemaid found Francis with his wrists slit at home, clutching the pink bottle of paper cranes I had once given him. Perhaps he had also noticed that the blue bottle of stars had been smashed by me and thrown into the trash, mixed with leftover scraps. Now it's over, I've become a widow. Story 2. My boyfriend is a proud, distant young genius, someone who is extremely averse to physical contact. We've been in a relationship for years, but we've never shared any of the usual intimacies between couples. I thought this was just his nature, and I was ready to accept a platonic relationship, until his birthday, when I took a hard-seat train journey for 40 hours just to visit him. And then I saw, under the streetlight, he was smiling, gently tugging at the ponytail of the girl beside him, and then he took her hand. At that moment, I decided I didn't want him anymore. I find it disgusting to be with a man who's been touched by someone else. The one who had always been so calm and controlled went mad. Chapter 1. It was the 14th day of my silent treatment with Bruno. His birthday. Carrying the birthday gift I'd saved up for by working for half a year, I rubbed my numb backside, a result of the 40-hour hard-seat train journey. From Province A to City B, 2,000 kilometers. I stood by the streetlight near the sports field of B University, feeling nervous, imagining Bruno's reaction when he saw me. It would probably be the same as always, expressionless, a simple nod in my direction. That's just how he is, like an emotionless robot. Thinking back to the reason for our argument, I couldn't help but sigh. In the distance, amidst the dim light, I saw that familiar figure. Just as I was about to go up to him, I noticed he wasn't alone. A girl with a high ponytail, dressed in sportswear, was looking up and chatting animatedly with Bruno. And Bruno, I don't think I've ever seen such a relaxed expression on Bruno's face before. The girl beside him kept chattering, and he reached out and gently tugged at her ponytail. The girl pouted playfully, slapping his hand. Instead of getting angry, he joined in her playful banter. The streetlight cast a gentle halo around the two of them, a handsome young man and a pretty girl, playing under the moonlight. It was as beautiful as a scene from a romantic drama, but I couldn't appreciate it at all. The reason was simple. Our argument had been about Bruno's personality, a young genius renowned throughout Province A, admitted to B University at 17. At 20, he had already become a rising star in academia. Geniuses have their quirks. Bruno is extremely averse to physical contact, almost to the point of pathology. He never takes part in any competitive sports and avoids public transportation at all costs. In middle school, he once beat his desk mate until he was covered in blood just because the boy had touched his hand as a joke. And I, as his girlfriend, was no exception. We didn't kiss, didn't hug, not even once held hands. Under the fireworks of our 1-year anniversary, I stood on tiptoe to secretly kiss his cheek. His gaze was calm and indifferent, but the quick step back hurt me for a long time. I always comforted myself, saying that Bruno was just like that. But sometimes, I couldn't help feeling unsatisfied. At the Qixi Festival Chinese Valentine's Day, my roommate announced her relationship, and her photo holding hands with her boyfriend received everyone's blessings on social media. I couldn't help but take a screenshot and send it to Bruno. Jokingly, I said that after 3 years of dating, I must be the only one in the world who had never held her partner's hand. He replied with just one word. Oh. I got upset and didn't send him a single message for 14 days. And he, even less likely, reached out to me. In the end, I convinced myself again, just like every time before. I crossed half of China to find him, only to see the scene. A huge sense of disconnection overwhelmed me. A motorcycle sped past the girl, and Bruno instinctively pulled her behind him, holding her hand. That obvious protective gesture made my heart ache once again. At the same time, Bruno also saw me across the street. Chapter 2. He still had no expression. He only paused for a moment, then quickly walked toward me. The girl exclaimed, "Hey!" and tugged on Bruno's sleeve. "Bruno, why are you suddenly walking so fast?" Bruno didn't pull away. Letting her tug at him, he walked up to me, looking down at me. "Why are you here?" The soft light shone in his eyes, and until today, I thought that was his way of being gentle. I forced a smile. I handed him the carefully wrapped gift. "Bruno, I came to wish you a happy birthday." Bruno was about to take my gift when the girl beside him suddenly spoke up. "Oh no! Bruno, our reservation at the restaurant is about to expire. We're going to be late. Let's go quickly." Bruno's movement was interrupted, and he took a few steps forward as the girl pulled him along. Suddenly, he stopped and looked back at me. "What are you standing there for? Come on." My steps were unsteady, and I instinctively followed them. I still hadn't recovered. The scene just now kept replaying in my mind. I understood that I was unnecessary behind them, like a burden in the front seat of the taxi. But could I really just give up so easily on someone I had loved for so many years? In the back seat, the girl chatted nonstop. She was talking about things in the lab that I couldn't understand. Bruno responded softly. The atmosphere between them was harmonious. I couldn't help but recall the details of our relationship. At first, I also liked to share interesting things in life with Bruno, even though he never responded. I never got tired of trying, until one day, while I was enthusiastically telling him about the kitten I had seen outside my dorm, he interrupted me. "Lily, are you this idle every day?" After that, I never spoke a word of nonsense to him again. Naturally, I didn't know that he would also listen so intently to someone else's nonsense. I tightened my grip on the handle of the gift bag, the edges digging painfully into my palm. An overwhelming sense of exhaustion and sadness threatened to crush me. The taxi driver noticed my reddened eyes. Half jokingly, he said, "Young man, don't just focus on chatting with your girlfriend. Your sister is feeling neglected and is about to cry." The back seat fell silent. Exposed to my vulnerability, I hurriedly wiped away my tears. A surge of embarrassment and awkwardness washed over me. Not long after, the girl let out a soft laugh. "Sorry, I almost forgot about you. I'm Bruno's junior, Fiona. I'm just 1 year below him, but I skipped a grade, so now we're both graduate students under the same advisor. If all goes well, we'll be doing our PhD together as well." "And who are you? Which school do you attend? Who's your advisor? How many papers have you published? I've never heard Bruno mention you." The girl was still smiling, but her smile carried a hint of mockery. So she was Fiona. It's embarrassing to admit, but I often stalked Bruno's school forum. Bruno was quite popular, and there were always posts about him. He never shared his life with me, so this was my only way of getting to know him. Fiona's name often came up alongside his. They called them the golden couple of the materials science department. I'd seen photos of them together. It was from some competition, with both of them standing on the highest podium. They held up the trophy together, smiling freely. I admit, at that moment, I was really jealous. The wind outside roared past my ears, and Bruno remained silent, faced with Fiona's blatant provocation. He showed no intention of defending me. I'm Bruno's girlfriend, I spoke softly. Chapter 3. The restaurant was a private Fujian cuisine place, and the prices on the menu made my legs weak. Fiona, clearly familiar with the place, ordered the dishes. Buddha jumps over the wall, white cut chicken, stuffed tofu. Let's start with these. Bruno likes them. Did Bruno like these? I didn't know. Before becoming a genius, Bruno was just like me, an ordinary kid from an ordinary family. When we went on dates, it was usually at small eateries by the roadside. On rare occasions when we splurged, we'd go for hot pot. Fujian cuisine? I'd never even heard of it. Fiona handed the menu back to the waiter. Before the waiter left, Bruno called him back. Add a spicy chicken dish. Fiona turned her head with a smile and asked Bruno, Bruno, didn't you say you never eat spicy food? Bruno took a sip of tea and didn't answer. Only I knew. The one who loves spicy food isn't him. It's me. I felt like crying again. Bruno was always like this. Just when I was about to give up, he would give me a glimmer of hope to keep chasing. Just like that day, when I tried to steal a kiss and he dodged. He then lowered his head and gently kissed my hair. Chapter 4. The food was delicious, but I had little appetite. After 40 hours on the train, trying to save money, I'd only eaten a packet of biscuits. In absolute exhaustion, I had no desire to eat. Time quickly reached midnight. Fiona clapped her hands, and several waiters pushed in a huge cake. The cake had 3 layers, beautifully decorated, with figures standing on each layer. They were dressed in lab coats, and I guess they were their lab colleagues. On the top layer were a man and woman standing shoulder to shoulder, smiling happily. The cake was pushed in front of Bruno, and Fiona spoke up. Bruno, happy 20th birthday. She pointed to the figures on the top layer and added, and may you and I meet at the top together. An untimely blessing. Because of that dish earlier, I still had a bit of expectation for Bruno. I hoped he would refuse the cake, and hoped he would say something to me, but he just smiled faintly and thanked Fiona. Then, with hands clasped, he sincerely made a wish. The candlelight softened his usually stern face. Tonight, he had smiled more than I had seen in the past few years combined. Would his wish have anything to do with me? Or, like Fiona, did he wish for them to reach the top together? They were geniuses, and I was just an ordinary, poor student. The gap between us was laid bare, brutally and plainly, before my eyes. So, I believed it was the latter. The candlelight went out, plunging the room into darkness. My feelings for Bruno seemed to darken as well. Fiona cheered and clapped. I forced a smile and clapped along weakly. Fiona cut a small piece of the cake and smeared it on Bruno's face. He just smiled and told her to stop messing around. Oh no, I've ruined Bruno's perfect face. To make it up to you, I'll give you a big gift. Chapter 5. Fiona pulled out a large box as if by magic, opening it in front of Bruno. The moment I saw the gift, my pupils constricted. Instinctively, I pushed the box at my feet further under the table. Inside the box lay a brand new laptop from a well-known brand, just like the one I had prepared for Bruno. Bruno, your old laptop is slow and outdated. Here, I got you a new one. I didn't buy anything too expensive. In case you wouldn't accept it, I just picked one at random. You won't mind, will you? The laptop was priced at $12,999. To buy it, I had worked as an after-school tutor for 6 months. Every weekend, I had to take a 2-hour round-trip bus ride to the other side of the city to teach students, all because that tutoring center paid 10 yuan more per hour than those around the school. The item that represented my countless hours of hard work, something I treated like a treasure, was merely something Fiona had picked at random. My hand holding the chopsticks trembled slightly. Fiona suddenly looked at me, smiling softly. Oh, we haven't seen what gift our sister-in-law got for Bruno yet. Saying that, she moved behind me. Before I could react, she reached out and took the box directly. I immediately tried to snatch it back. The gift box, halfway open in Fiona's hand, fell to the ground. The laptop I had held so carefully, never letting it leave my embrace, crashed onto the floor, making a dull thud. Oops, sorry. Fiona apologized, but I couldn't hear any sincerity in her voice. I knelt down to check the laptop. The casing was slightly bent, the screen had several large cracks, and pressing the power button did nothing. Bruno knelt beside me, trying to help me up. Lily, for once, I heard a hint of guilt in his voice. I raised my hand to push him away, numbly putting the laptop back in the box. Then, I turned and left the private room. As soon as I stepped out, I started running. It seemed only then that Bruno realized what had happened. Lily! Chapter 6. I couldn't match his strength, and he caught me at the entrance of the restaurant. He was panting, his cool fingers gripping my shoulder. I looked up and met his gaze, clearly seeing the shock in Bruno's eyes. His trembling hand touched my cheek, wiping away the wetness. Only then did I realize I was crying. So, this is what it feels like to be touched by Bruno. A bitter taste spread at the corner of my mouth, tears running down to my neck, leaving it damp. Bruno couldn't wipe away all my tears, so he simply pulled me into his arms. Lily, don't cry. Please don't cry. He repeated my name over and over, his voice panicked. As I wept, I finally became an exception for him, but I was no longer the only exception. Perhaps, in places I couldn't see, he had already crossed his boundaries for Fiona again and again. Bruno, after gathering my thoughts for a long time, I finally spoke, and only then did I realize how firm my voice could be. Let's break up. Bruno paused for a moment, then looked up, his eyes filled with confusion. Is it really necessary, Lily? Emotions flickered in his eyes, and finally, he seemed to think of something. He sighed, as if a bit helpless. Lily, do you want me to coax you? Since when did you become so childish? Between Fiona and me, you don't understand, so don't make a fuss. Bruno's tone was flat, as if I were an easy math problem, one that he could solve effortlessly, arriving at the perfect answer. Clearly, he thought that someone like me couldn't comprehend the intricacies between him and Fiona, and that there was no need to explain it to an ordinary person like me. He believed I shouldn't be childish and should just pretend like nothing happened, as I had done every time before. Like a pet under his control, I suddenly felt like laughing, but tears slipped into the corner of my mouth. I raised my hand, intending to slap him, but in an instant, all my strength left me. My nails grazed his face, leaving a faint scratch. Bruno, what genius! You're just an arrogant fool. Bruno was stunned for a moment, then raised his hand to touch his face. Suddenly, he spoke. Does this make you feel better? Before I could reply, Fiona suddenly ran over. The moment she saw the scratch on Bruno's cheek, her expression changed, as if she wanted to tear me apart. She stood protectively in front of Bruno, her voice breaking. If you have something against me, come at me directly. Why are you bullying Bruno? Not satisfied with just yelling, Fiona took 2 steps forward, raising her hand to slap me. I raised my hand to block her, and the moment our fingertips met, I saw a hint of triumph in her eyes. Ah! Fiona fell to the ground, clutching her ankle, but I hadn't even used any force. Lily! I didn't. Bruno and I spoke at the same time, our voices clashing in the air. One was innocent, the other full of anger. You should know, what happens between us has nothing to do with a third person. You've really disappointed me. The desire to defend myself disappeared entirely at that moment. I watched as Bruno picked up the crying Fiona in his arms. Before he turned to leave, he gave me one last look. His gaze was cold, like he was looking at a stranger. He rarely showed emotion, but now, because of her, he had broken that rule once again. They were entangled, like 2 vines. I suddenly remembered something that happened after the college entrance exams. That time when Bruno and I went on a trip together. I had a fever of 40 degrees. I begged him to take me to the hospital, and after hesitating for a long time, He still called an ambulance. Lily, you can understand me, right? When the ambulance arrived, it got stuck in traffic. And by the time we reached the hospital, I almost developed pneumonia. My best friend Anna found out about this and angrily cursed Bruno, saying he wasn't worth anything. She said he never really loved me. Back then, I still defended him, saying it was just his nature, not that he didn't love me. Now, it's as if that bullet from back then hit me square between the eyes. How could he forget about the ambulance in the same situation now? I had to admit it. It wasn't that he couldn't love, he just couldn't be bothered to love me. Chapter 7. I booked the earliest ticket back to school for the next day, in City B, where I didn't know anyone and had no money. I could only spend the night in a corner of the train station. After returning to school, I fell seriously ill. When I woke up in the hospital room, Anna's eyes were red and swollen, like 2 large walnuts. Lily, I told you a long time ago, Bruno is unreliable. Anna had never liked Bruno. She called me a love-struck fool, and Bruno a chauvinist. If it had been before, I would have immediately argued back. But now, after everything that had happened, I had long since lost the grounds to argue. I could only nod. Anna, I wish I had listened to you earlier. As we spoke, my phone rang. It was the special ringtone I had set for Bruno. Last year, on my birthday, Bruno said he would grant me any wish. I shamelessly begged him to sing 2 Tigers for me, and I set it as my ringtone. He looked at me with a half-helpless, half-indulgent smile. Back then, I really thought happiness had landed in my hands. I thought Bruno would gradually change for me. I believed we would eventually become the most ordinary and happiest couple in the world. A bitter smile spread across my lips, and I felt like crying again. I hung up the call and blocked Bruno. Opening WeChat, I noticed Bruno's avatar had a few red dots for once. He asked where I was. Sent a photo of Fiona with her foot in a cast. Because of your recklessness, someone else got hurt. What happened between us? You shouldn't have dragged her into it. After countless green messages in the chat, it was rare to see a white one, but it was for someone else. Blaming me. I couldn't hold back. Tears fell one by one onto the phone screen. Bruno and I met in middle school and accompanied each other through our youth. To me, he wasn't just a lover. He was also someone I admired and chased after. The awkward comfort he gave me when I failed an exam. The special tutoring he provided before college entrance exams. The genius who never did his homework hand-copied an entire book of unique study notes just for me. An ordinary, clumsy girl. I held the notebook, my heart pounding like a drum, pretending to ask casually, Bruno, you put so much effort into this. Do you like me or something? Hiding my true feelings behind a joke. My voice trembled. Time ticked by. Second by second. I had no idea how long it had passed. Suddenly, he spoke, his voice calm as usual, as if discussing the weather. I like you. I looked up at him in shock. The evening glow outside the window bathed half of his face in a crimson light. At that moment, I thought he had feelings for me, and just like that, I became the girlfriend of a genius. The doubts around us surged like waves, but they couldn't shake me. I followed behind him, running after him for a long distance. In half a year, I went from an average second-tier university to a 211 university, and now, I had a chance to secure a guaranteed spot for graduate school at Bruno's university. I gritted my teeth, all for the sake of getting a little closer to him. I was so close. Just a little bit more and I could have reached his side. But after working hard for so many years, no one told me that people can change. People do change. The boy who once confessed his love to me under a sky ablaze with color now liked someone else. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, typing out long paragraphs, explanations, accusations, angry curses. In the end, I deleted it all, word by word. There's no need, I thought. Bruno, out of the goodness of my heart, let me explain something to you. A genius who doesn't understand the mundane world. What you're doing is called cheating. After sending that message, I opened his profile. Once you block this contact, you will no longer receive messages from them. My finger hovered over the confirm button for a long time. Finally, I pressed it. I collapsed into Anna's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. Chapter 8. Bruno was no longer a part of my life. A breakup is like a long, drawn-out torture, like being cut with a blunt knife. Whenever I thought of him, my heart would suddenly tighten, hurting so much. But as time went on, the pain became numb. From beginning to end, I hadn't done anything wrong. Someone who is blameless shouldn't be trapped by someone who is wrong. I threw myself into my studies, forcing myself not to think about Bruno. Just when I thought I was finally getting over the breakup, we got entangled again in an unexpected way. I didn't expect to go viral. It started with someone shipping Bruno and Fiona as a couple on his school's forum. The post gained a lot of attention. Most of the comments were things like "so sweet and handsome guy and beautiful girl, perfect match." But then, there was a comment that stood out. Am I the only one who remembers this? Didn't Bruno have a girlfriend for years? A single comment set off a huge wave. This comment instantly sparked heated discussions. Huh? No way. Does that mean Fiona is the other woman? Don't spread rumors without proof, okay? Bruno has always been a loner. Where's the evidence of him having a girlfriend? I'm in the same department as Bruno. His personality is a bit odd, but I've only ever seen him be that close with Fiona. Someone even shared countless photos of Bruno and Fiona together to support their claim. Standing together on the podium, attending campus events together. They were always shoulder to shoulder, always smiling brightly. The comment about me was quickly deleted, but the buzz didn't die down. It even spread to other platforms. With Bruno and Fiona being standout figures at a prestigious school, it attracted a lot of attention. There were even some high school classmates who posted photos of Bruno and me, confirming our relationship. And what Fiona was in this scenario became self-evident. A few hours after things escalated, Fiona posted a long statement to clear her name, claiming she wasn't the other woman. Not only that, she attached 2 photos, one of herself with her foot in a cast, and another of Bruno with an injury on his cheek. And she wrote this: "For a long time, Bruno has been unilaterally harassed by this lady, and he has expressed his discomfort many times. However, this lady not only refused to stop but also followed Bruno to City B on his birthday. After being rejected, she became enraged, hit Bruno, and pushed me when I tried to help, which resulted in a fracture in my left ankle. Out of respect for their long acquaintance, Bruno chose not to press charges, but we do not wish for kindness to be repaid with malicious slander. MS. Lily, I hope you conduct yourself well." Chapter 9. On the internet, people rarely have the patience to discern the truth. This distorted statement immediately pushed the situation to its peak. Fiona publicly disclosed my name, and since someone had previously posted my photo in the comments section, the internet users easily dug up all my personal information. They stormed into the school's forum, cursing me as a psychopath, saying I was an ugly troublemaker, a cockroach who couldn't stand to see others happy. The dean's office summoned me and subtly reminded me. They said my actions had brought too much negative attention to the school. "Lily, the school has no intention of interfering in your private life, but if this continues, your opportunity for the overseas exchange program might." The school always had an exchange program abroad. Several teachers who knew me well had suggested I give it a try, but back then, I only wanted to secure a spot in Bruno's university for grad school, and I was overwhelmed with grades and credits. I also didn't want a long-distance relationship with Bruno, so I turned down the teacher's suggestions. The day I returned with the broken laptop in my arms, I suddenly understood. Within the last 2 hours before the system closed, I submitted the exchange application. With my grades, it should have been a sure thing. But then all this happened. The screen of the academic office teacher's phone was on Fiona's profile page. She had updated it again. In the photo, she had an 4 in her hand, and there, caught inadvertently, was a slender hand next to her, preparing her medication. Caption: "With you here, even the bitterest medicine is bearable." The comment section was filled with well wishes, everyone wishing her and the man in the photo a long and happy relationship. There were even people taking subtle digs at me. Now this is real girlfriend treatment. Someone must be jumping with envy seeing this. Ha! When I was sick, Bruno only told me to drink more hot water. I looked away from the screen and took out my phone. Opened my drafts. Found the evidence I had organized after staying up for 3 nights. In it were fragments of our happiness. Proof that Bruno and I had once been happy. Originally, I planned to show it to the world at our wedding. But now, it has become my lifeline. I gently pressed the send button. Professor, you don't have to worry anymore. Chapter 10. Shortly after sending the evidence, I received a call from a high school classmate I hadn't heard from in a long time. I answered, and it was Bruno's voice. He sounded tired. Are you done, Lily? Delete the post. I laughed in anger. Done? Because Fiona lied. I was harassed online for days, even getting dirty looks when I went to the cafeteria. Because Fiona lied. I was almost disciplined by the school and lost my chance to go abroad. And you're here blaming me. Bruno, you and Fiona are a perfect match. You both have no shame. There was a moment of silence on the other end. You're going abroad? How come I didn't know? I sneered. Bruno, don't forget. We already broke up. Bruno sighed deeply. Lily, we haven't broken up. There are too many things you don't understand. And I'll explain them in time. Just delete the post first. Fiona's not doing well. Even though I had already completely lost hope in Bruno. At that moment, I couldn't help but feel my heart grow cold. Even now, he was still trying to brush me off. All the pain I had suffered meant nothing to him. The rumors about me fermented online for 3 days. And he said nothing. But because Fiona wasn't doing well, he took the initiative to reach out and make peace. So he does know how to use the internet. I couldn't help it, I cursed. Then hung up the phone. After sitting in the chair for a while, I directly called the police. Wasn't Fiona not doing well? Well, let me pour some oil on the fire and let her see what it's like to face a lawsuit. Chapter 11. Fiona's actions fell under defamation. Under pressure from the internet and the police, Fiona deleted the false statements. However, the internet has a memory. Screenshots of her posts and the photos showing off their affection were all over the web. The attention it drew far surpassed what I had faced. Fiona's school also issued a statement, saying they would handle the matter seriously. Just as I thought everything was finally getting better and I was focusing on preparing to go abroad, I received terrible news. My spot in the exchange program had been revoked. I asked for the reason repeatedly, but all I got was the teacher's dismissive response. This is the school's decision. We didn't want this to happen either. It's late now. You should go. We're about to close. The door to the academic office slammed shut. It was already late autumn, with a fine drizzle falling, adding a touch of chill. I looked up, and under the streetlight, in the curtain of rain, stood a familiar figure. Bruno. Just my luck. I planned to turn and leave as if I hadn't seen him, but he grabbed my wrist tightly. The cold touch sent shivers through me, giving me goosebumps. Lily. I shook off his hand. Get lost. He looked behind me and suddenly said, if you withdraw the lawsuit now, there might still be a chance. I froze. Half a month ago, I filed a private lawsuit. I took Fiona to court. The other side proposed a private settlement, but I refused. In a flash, I seemed to understand. Is Fiona behind this? Bruno just said, I've already advised you. Withdraw the lawsuit, and I'll help speak to the teachers on your behalf. I laughed mockingly. You want to plead for me? Aren't you afraid Fiona will be upset? Destroying a temple is better than breaking a marriage. I wouldn't want to see you two lovebirds turn against each other. Bruno shook his head. His expression conflicted. It's not. I won't be with Fiona. Just listen. All right? Listen? I couldn't stop trembling. I raised my hand, and the slap that should have fallen long ago landed hard on Bruno's face. Bruno, loving you was the biggest regret of my life. His head turned to the side, and he didn't look back for a long time. Bruno would never understand that what I loved wasn't his genius. The moment I truly fell for him might have been when he protected a bullied little girl in an alley or when he bought everything from an old lady selling her wares on a rainy night. That was the Bruno I knew. Although he seemed a bit aloof, he was actually full of justice. But as I've said before, people change. The once righteous boy who refused to go along with the crowd had now become rotten. Withdraw the lawsuit? Never. Do what you want. I believe in the eternity of truth. Don't come looking for me anymore. Bruno. I'm not the only one with a cleanliness obsession. I find a man touched by others dirty too. Bruno tried to grab me again. He seemed to realize something, his voice sharp and urgent. Lily! I kicked out with my leg, my shoe making a dull thud as it hit him. I heard him grunt in pain, but he still wouldn't let go. Bruno, don't make me disgusted by you. The man behind me was silent. Finally, slowly, he let go of my hand, bit by bit, without looking back. I ran into the rain. Chapter 12. I would never tell Bruno that just the day before he came looking for me, I received a private message. The person claimed to be Bruno's senior from the same lab. He asked if I knew why Bruno cared so much about Fiona. Initially, I didn't plan to reply, but he sent several messages on his own. Look into who Fiona's father is. You'll be surprised. Who wouldn't want a good father-in-law and a bright future? If Fiona picked me, maybe I'd have published papers until I couldn't keep up. Have you ever experienced the feeling of having something you worked so hard for taken away by someone else? I've experienced it many times. We're both victims. At that time, I didn't want to believe it, because I thought that at least Bruno's academic ability was trustworthy. After all, he was a genius. But deep down, a vague suspicion began to grow. I looked into Bruno's supervisor. In the photo, the man wore gold-rimmed glasses and smiled with gentle elegance. That face had traces of Fiona in it. When I saw Bruno at the entrance, I inexplicably turned on my phone's recorder. Now, that recording quietly lay in my phone. On the screen, Bruno's senior had sent me a new message. He was sitting on the rooftop. Beneath him was a bottomless abyss. He won't let me graduate. I don't want to live anymore. My fingers moved slightly, and this time, I replied to him. If you die, it's all over. We are indeed victims. But who said victims have to sit and wait for their doom? I contacted Bruno's senior, Joel. Luckily, he had kept a lot of evidence. My account had gained a lot of attention due to the battle of the century with Fiona. So for the sake of exposure, we organized the evidence. Together with the recording, we posted everything on my account. Top university PhD, students exploited by supervisors, academic tyranny oppressing the innocent. Any one of these topics could instantly set the internet on fire. Bruno's school quickly responded, suspending all of Fiona's father's work. That day, Bruno frantically tried to contact me, screaming on the other end of the phone. Lily, how dare you? How dare you? I smiled softly. Chapter 13. On the day of the trial, the weather was perfect. With a cloudless sky, the court found Fiona guilty of defamation and sentenced her to 1 year in prison, with a 2-year probation. She broke down crying in court. I wonder if, for even a moment, she regretted causing such chaos for the sake of one man. On the same day, the university also announced the decision regarding Fiona's father. He was dismissed from all positions and had his teaching credentials revoked. All the students in his lab were transferred to other supervisors, except for Bruno. Upon investigation, out of the 7 papers he had published, he had only personally participated in 3 of them. Clinging to Fiona's connections had clearly brought him a lot of benefits. When the truth came out, the whole school was in an uproar. The campus prince had turned into a despised thief. The once prodigious young genius had finally fallen into the mud. After Bruno dropped out, no one saw him again. Some said he went behind the scenes at a major company. Others said he returned to his small hometown to deliver takeout. No one could tell what was true. Not long after, my spot in the exchange program was reinstated. As I passed through security, I glanced back. Among the crowd, a familiar figure seemed to flash by. I didn't look back again or wonder who it might have been. This time, I was heading toward a future where I fought for myself. Chapter 14. No way. Lily, you're really getting married? To that wimpy senior from back then? Joel, sitting in the driver's seat, twitched his lips. I laughed and explained to Anna on the other end of the phone. What wimpy senior? He has a name. Jiangzhou texts Joel. It's about time we had an ending after all these years. I'm not kidding. You better come be my bridesmaid. After I went abroad, unfamiliar with everything, Joel helped me a lot. Over time, we became close. A year later, Joel successfully graduated with his PhD. And that night, this 6-foot-tall man cried like a child. He said I was his savior, the goddess who gave him a second chance at life. Of course, if the goddess was willing to date him, he would be even more grateful. I accepted his confession, not just because of his touching words, but also because he is an honest, kind, and down-to-earth person. After we started dating, our relationship was always stable. When the exchange period ended, I stayed in M country to continue my graduate studies. Joel decided to start his own business and, along with a few of his peers, founded Jiangzhou Tech. 2 more years passed, and when I finished my student life and decided to return home to advance my career, Joel's company had also started to grow. This time, we were coming back to prepare for our wedding. On the other end of the phone, Anna was still marveling at the unpredictability of life. She was silent for a moment, then said, "Did you know that Bruno is getting married too?" I responded with a soft "oh." Internally, I didn't feel much, but Joel seemed a bit anxious. He grabbed the phone and quickly said goodbye to Anna before hanging up. "Darling, we still have to visit several stores to try on wedding dresses. We need to hurry, or we won't make it." I didn't mention the obvious change of subject, just smiled softly. "Okay, I'll do as you say." Chapter 15. Vivida is a world-class wedding dress brand, and 6 months ago, I saw a creation in a magazine that was said to be the masterpiece of the chief designer, into which he had poured his life's work. It was love at first sight. This time, we had come specifically to try it on. Joel and I had made an appointment in advance, but when we arrived at the bridal shop's entrance, we were stopped. The shop assistant's face was full of concern. "Could you please wait for a moment? There's a situation inside." Even though her words were subtle, I could still make out parts of the argument coming from inside the shop. "What's the big deal about a stupid wedding dress? You won't let me try it on? You snobs!" The woman's voice was shrill, while the shop assistant tried to explain in a gentle voice. "Madam, this dress is already reserved by another customer." "Screw you, bitch! You look down on me? Madam, if you continue to cause trouble, we'll have to call security." That voice sounded vaguely familiar to me. The next second, security guards were escorting the cursing woman out, and I finally saw her face clearly. Fiona. When she saw me, her angry curses stopped, and she froze. I hadn't seen her in a long time. She had lost a lot of weight and her skin had darkened. A far cry from the vibrant, arrogant girl I remembered. If she was here, then the other person inside must be. A tall figure walked out from the store. Who else could it be but Bruno? He had gained some weight. His clothes didn't fit well, and his eyes were full of exhaustion. No longer the spirited young man he used to be. When our eyes met, he instinctively took a step back. The shop assistant walked over with a smile, apologizing repeatedly. "I'm sorry for the wait. The dress you reserved is inside. This way, please." I nodded, not sparing Bruno and Fiona another glance, and pulled Joel along with me. It truly lived up to being Vivida's signature piece. The moment I stood in front of the mirror, my breath nearly stopped. I rarely use words like radiant to describe a dress, but it indeed possessed a breathtaking beauty. Clang! The cup in Joel's hand fell to the floor, his mouth slightly open. I smiled and patted his hand. "Stunned?" "Yeah, stunned." Joel's eyes were actually a bit red. "This is the one. How did I ever get so lucky to marry someone like you?" "Oh, he's exaggerating again. Who says science guys aren't romantic?" I hadn't even had time to say anything before we were interrupted by a shout from outside. "Bruno, do you want to die? Do you still like her? Look at yourself now. Who else would want you but me? Do you think she still wants anything to do with you? You have to stay with me. Even if you die, we die together. This is what you owe my family." Fiona was hysterical, crying and pounding on Bruno, but Bruno remained unmoved, his eyes fixed straight in the direction of Joel and me. Joel clicked his tongue and stepped in front of me. I turned to the shop assistant beside me. "In this kind of situation, aren't you going to do something?" The shop assistant seemed to snap out of it and quickly called for security. The security guards reached out to grab Fiona, but she lay on the floor, rolling around and making a scene. Before long, a crowd had gathered to watch. With an audience, Fiona became even more outrageous. crying and complaining to Bruno. Joel and I crossed our arms, quietly watching the drama unfold. Bruno finally couldn't take it anymore. "Can you stop this already?" He kicked away Fiona's hand as she tried to grab his pant leg, pushing through the crowd and walking out. Fiona froze, staring at her hand. With the drama over, the crowd dispersed, leaving Fiona sitting alone on the store's doorstep. At that moment, I wondered if she regretted choosing Bruno. I didn't know. All I knew was that people have to take responsibility for their choices. I squeezed Joel's hand. His hands were warm and strong, and we supported each other through the long years. There was no one looking up to the other, no one chasing the other. Perhaps the kind of love that suited me was always meant to be like this. "All right, this is the one. Let's go home. You can make me braised ribs." Joel held my hand, his voice gentle. "All right,